Are you guys okay if we get started a little early? Yeah. Yeah? I mean, then you guys don't have to like wait and stuff. So that's cool.
And we feel less awkward.
Yeah, and then we feel less awkward. I know, how do we fill 8 minutes? I guess we could like tap dance or something. Sure. Or we could just start. So let's do that.
Go with start.
Yeah, that's what I'm going with. So, welcome to Taking Back the Comment section, and this is a kind of a discussion on gender and harassment and just kind of the way that women are treated and portrayed and things like that. So, welcome. And I mean, many of us have faced like harassment online, and it can be a number of things. It can just be like that one annoying troll that won't go away, and you just always see their little icon pop up. Or it can also be like way more serious. Like it can also turn into things like doxing, or you've heard of swatting. I'm sure a lot of people have. You can also get like death threats and rape threats. This is a thing that happens to a lot of people, sometimes on a daily basis, and it's really scary. And all the people on this panel have experienced like some form of harassment or just not being taken seriously in the workplace or whatever due to gender. And so I want to make sure I can introduce everybody. So I will go ahead and start with Anna, and take it away.
I'm Anna Visneski. I actually was the chief of digital media for the U.S. Coast Guard. I started the Coast Guard social media program. And also I was the first official blogger for any armed service. So I did a lot of consulting for games. I've been pretty active in the gaming community, but I also have a view of online harassment from slightly different perspective, from being a woman serving in a technical field from the U.S. military. So.
And my name is Anna Kerr, known as Circuits and Coffee on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, all those fun social platforms.
Hi, I'm Nina Freeman. I'm a level designer at Fulbright. We just released a game called Tacoma, and you might also know me from my other work. I released a game called Sybil and another game called How Do You Do It in the past. So I'm more of a game designer, like how everyone laughs. Glad the humor of the game carries into this situation. But yeah, I make video games.
And I am Kinsey Burke. I'm on Metal Jesus Rocks and my own YouTube channel. I've done a lot of freelance video game PR, so I will be doing my best to moderate this panel.
I think she figured out earlier we're a little hard to moderate.
So my job's gonna be easy. Right? And I wanted to start off with one of the most accessible forms of harassment, and that would be on social media platforms. Be that on Twitter, including the YouTube comments. Like, I know personally, I've had people create like a fake Twitter account, and the only reason it exists is to harass me. And I feel like that's a lot of effort to go through. They're like, I'm gonna make this Twitter account, I'm gonna make a new email just to call this girl fat. Why? So yeah, I just wanted to have everyone kind of go through what they think with social media, especially in light of recent events. Go ahead and start with Anna. Anna closest to me.
I was like, which Anna? There's
rock,
two of
paper,
us.
scissors.
So obviously from being in the Coast Guard, we got a lot of interesting messaging, including being on kill lists. That was kind of interesting. Having people tweet at my personal account. And then I have someone who, because I was involved in a case, I was the public affairs officer in charge of a sexual assault case. And there were some people involved in that case that still, even though I've been out for a little over a year, every now and then they'll pop back up and make accusations at me that I'm an apologist for the way the military does things, even though that's really not true. I almost got myself thrown out of the Coast Guard like twice for mouthing off about that issue. But anyway, when this harassment pops up, what will happen is I'll know that I'm about to hit a cascade of death and rape threats for about 72 hours to a week, because my Twitter account will suddenly start getting hits, and then all of a sudden it starts pouring into my email. They start emailing me at work, and things like that. So it's an interesting experience, and it's exhausting. And anyone who says, well, just don't go on social media, well, how do you stop it when it's hitting you in your email, and they're emailing your significant other, and they're emailing your parents, and they're emailing your boss, like how do you go off social media then? And I think we're gonna all kind of get into this in a little bit, but one big point we were talking about earlier is the stuff that's going on social media, until Twitter, specifically Twitter, because Instagram's a little bit better about it, but until Twitter, like, actually gets their shit together, pardon my language, but gets their shit together and actually starts upholding their own policies, a lot of what we say or do or try to protect each other isn't gonna matter because these people just keep creating accounts, or they don't get banned, or the wrong person gets banned. And that actually leads into what you were saying about the best way, I think, to deal with a lot of this is, since Twitter's not going to protect us, we need to protect each other, and we just need to be the louder voices.
Yeah. And that kind of extends into YouTube as well. That's where I see most of the comments. I'm kind of lucky I haven't been that harassed on Twitter, but that's the way you engage with your community as a creator. And so you need to be looking at those places. But you also need to deal with all of this sludge that just comes through. And I think we'll get into the topic of white knights and things like that, and how really banding together and being the louder, positive voice is the right action to take. So,
My perspective. Yeah, obviously a lot of people in the industry have experienced horrible, horrible acts of harassment. And I'm a weird case because I actually haven't gotten that bad. Like, I haven't had many horrible experiences, which I feel very lucky for. And so I personally feel like this issue is very important for me to speak about because I'm like, I haven't been like horribly attacked, but I want to show up to support my fellow developers who have been, because I have been there with them when this shit's happened and it's bad. And I think the important thing for me to think about is like, especially with social media, like that is the way I built my career. And the fact that it is also a space where people desire to be toxic towards, you know, other people who are kind of also trying to build their careers in the way that I have is, you know, really a bummer for me, because I'm like, well, I can't leave no matter what. Like, it's how I like sell games. So like I can't leave social media. I have to like help make it better, ideally. I don't think I'm perfect at that, but I hope that I can speak out for it, because it really is like important to consider this stuff, because it's the way that, you know, you guys get to play games, it's the way you can find out about games, it's the way that developers can make names for themselves. So I think it's just really important to make it a safer space, because it can help someone like actually build a meaningful career. And just can be a fun place to be a social person. But like for me, I'm like, the only reason I can even be here is because I have a presence on social media, and I don't want it to be a space where that stuff happens regularly, you know? Because it's like, we have to let people like be themselves there and like feel comfortable and build careers out of it. So yeah, I think it's really important to talk about this stuff and like be open to ideas about how we can make it better.
Real quick question, and you don't have to necessarily raise your hands because that makes a lot of people feel awkward, but how many of you have seen or heard someone use the argument, well, then you just shouldn't go on Twitter or shouldn't go on the internet? Okay, yeah, pretty much all of us. Another question, how many of you, and this will kind of lead into our white knight conversation, how many of you have seen someone you know that you work with, or that might even be a friend, who has said something where you're like, oh God? Okay. How many of you, and again, I'm not trying to put anyone on the spot. I could say everyone close your eyes, raise your hand. But how many of you have actually stood up to that person and said, hey, you know what? That wasn't cool. Okay. How many of you, how hard was that?
It's hard.
Yeah. It's hard, isn't it? Because you're telling...
I didn't find it hard, but I'm an asshole.
That's my argument too. I don't find it hard. I do. But that's one of the big things we were talking about earlier, was how when you have to look at someone that you know that might be in a bigger position of power than you, or you might have been friends with them for a long time, it can be really hard to be like, hey, you know what? That wasn't cool. My boyfriend and I had a fantastic conversation about this recently. A friend of his was mansplaining something to me that I'm literally an expert in. Gee, Kinsey, has that ever happened to you?
Oh, what, never?
Anna? Does that happen to you? And he mentioned to me, he says, well, I'm not quite sure what to do here because you're so strong. I don't want you to think that I think you need me to protect you. And to me, that was wonderful because we had an honest conversation about it. We had an honest conversation where he wanted to respect me as a person and the fact that I could probably punch this other person in the throat and knock them down. But he didn't want to seem like he was white knighting, that he was stepping in and being the big boyfriend and protecting the woman. What I pointed out to him was the person that was mansplaining to me, even though I was the expert, that person had more positional power than I did. So if I clapped back at him, he had more what we call cat centrality. He has more influence. And if I clap back at him, I'm just being uppity. I'm just being a bitch. So having another man who is his peer, another man who is his equal in this weird, unfortunate microcosm we have is important. So sometimes if you see someone, for me at least, what I loved was that he said, here's the reason, he's like, I want to speak up, but let me know if this is the okay thing to do. And to me, the respect that showed me that not only did he want to stand up and say something, and he was going to stand up and say something, but that he respected me enough to say, hey, I know you could probably beat the crap out of him, but is it okay if I step in here and tell him he's a dick? I was like, yeah, totally cool. So this was the white knight thing we were all talking about. So you had a couple really good points on the banding together.
Yeah. If you've been in the YouTube comments, don't know if you've been there before, it can be a little dicey.
It's a dark place.
It can be a dark place. It can be a really good place, you know. I think we've all seen channels that you're like, oh man, these comments are amazing, and others are like, oh god, why did I scroll down? But most of the time, especially on extremely popular videos, you'll eventually get to a point where people are arguing about like, you know, you don't need to come to this person's defense, you know, you're not doing this person any favors. But we were talking earlier, and it's the taking away that person's power and being like coming back at a positive with positive reinforcements, like, yeah, it's actually okay to try to drown out that voice because you want to support each other and you want to bring the positivity to the front and not just let this happen. Let's not argue about who should or shouldn't be defending this. It's like whatever the situation is, it's not okay. And I think having any help is welcomed.
Maybe it's my turn. I want to interject that.
It can be your turn.
I like this conversation because so from my personal experience coming into games, I early on was like part of a group that would teach women how to code, and we were like a feminist group trying to like, you know, make it better for women in games and all this stuff. And something that I found early on was that it felt like I was shouldering a lot of the emotional labor around this topic, like within like this community I was in, along with the other women I was working with, and not as many people as I would have hoped from outside of our group were like chiming in to help. So I think that got kind of exhausting. So I think it's really important to have, outside people coming in and like speaking up about this stuff, like you were talking about the white knighting example. Because like otherwise it's just like left up to like, for example with me, I'm trying to make video games. I don't want to spend my whole career just talking about how being a woman in games sucks. Like I actually want to like make things and talk about like game design. So I actually ended up kind of separating myself from that group because it was taking up so much of my career that I was like, even though this is so important to me, like I actually have to separate myself from it because like I feel like it's becoming my career, which I don't, like I'm not an activist by trade. I totally respect people who are, but that's like not what I was trying to do. I was like, I want to support that, but ultimately I want to be a game designer. So people like chiming in like that and like helping you speak up and like,
it's exhausting.
Yeah, and it's just like so important to have people chime in like that because otherwise it's just up to us, like we're on this panel talking about it, for example, but like I think everyone needs to participate in order for anything to change and in order for women and other minorities in order to actually like work on the things that they care about, because if they have to spend all of their energy like fighting against harassment and stuff, then they can't work and create things. And that's something that has troubled me for a really long time. And it makes me sad that I've had to like separate myself from it a lot in order to keep working, you know? So yeah, I think that stuff is really
And it's
important.
broader even now than just gaming. Like gaming, this has been a problem. And there was an excellent article not terribly long ago about how Gamergate and some of the online harassment was actually a precursor to what we're seeing on a national level now. We're not in a sprint. We're in a marathon. And this isn't just affecting women or minorities or transgendered or gay or, it's affecting all of us now. Everything they said was just the internet, oh, it's just a bunch of trolls. Yeah, you know what? While people were saying it's just a bunch of trolls, they kind of ran away with the whole country. So when we're really looking at it and you see how much, someone thought it was okay recently to walk down the street in Seattle, Washington wearing a Nazi armband and then look surprised when someone knocked him unconscious. I'm sorry, I'm third generation military. I will continue punching Nazis as long as I need to. But this is a marathon and we're all going to get exhausted. And I'm going to be honest with you, women of color, minority groups as a whole are already exhausted going into this. So we need to look out for each other. We need to support each other. We need to speak up for each other. If you are in a position of privilege, which all of us here are white women, we are in a position of privilege. We are in a position of privilege compared to women of color, to our transgendered friends. We are in a position of privilege, and that's why it's safer for us to be here, and it's safer for us to speak up than it is for some other people. And you know what? Going from what Wonder Woman talked about, you know, that's the whole, like, if you don't stand up, who will? So we have to be in this together. And that's on Twitter, that's when you're playing Overwatch. that's for everything, so.
And I mean, we face this in like all aspects of our life, because it's not only just on the internet and on social media, it also happens in the workplace. Because I know a lot of us here, we work, you know, in tech or whatever, and it happens there too. And I know Nina has some really good points about trying to get your game out, you know, and trying to promote it and things like that. Yep. Uh-oh. She's already on it.
Here we go.
And I really wanted to make sure we talked about this. Yeah.
Well, this kind of ties into what I was saying before, which is like, it can be, obviously it's difficult to be a woman making games because you get harassed and all these horrible things happen, as we've been talking about. But the other thing that I think is important to remember is, like, with my experience working in that, you know, group that was trying to teach women how to code and doing like this stuff to try and make it more inclusive. When I would do interviews early on in my career, which isn't that long ago, it's like 5 years ago. So like 5 years ago, when I was like people were interviewing me about this work, which I'm lucky to have gotten interviews at all, but I did. And a lot of these people, instead of focusing on my game, which usually they'd email me and be like, I want to talk to you about Sybil or something. Or how do you do it? And then I'd be like, okay, cool, yeah, I want to talk to you about that. And I would go into the interview, and basically they would just, instead of talking about my game, just be like, what's like being a woman in games? Like, what are your dramatic stories? Like, do you hate your life? Like, whatever, you know, I'm exaggerating, but like, but not by much, yeah. And so it really kind of sucked to be asked to do interviews about my work when they just wanted to ask me about like, my gender, basically, and like my life experience as a woman in games, which is an important thing to talk about, which is why I do stuff like this. But it was like, I had to really like fight with these people to get them to talk about my work. I honestly have learned how to basically conduct interviews myself when I'm in an interview, and to like steer it into being about my work instead of just about me as a person. And I've had to do that because of the fact that this kind of thing is very topical and edgy to talk about with the press. And it's like, but that's not the only thing that's interesting about me, I hope. Like, I've made all these video games too, which is why you reached out to me. So, long story short, I just hope people, when they talk about specific women in their work, like signal boost women for their work, don't only ask them about their experiences with harassment. Listen to them if they want to talk about that. But first and foremost, acknowledge that they're in this industry and they're working really hard to try and make it. And it's hard because people don't always want to pay attention to their work. They want to talk about what is going to like cause drama. and it's just like, no, just like support women's work, because it's just like we get ignored so often, and it sucks.
I like what you said there, because I think a lot of us create things and put it on the internet, and we want to talk about the thing we created. We don't want to talk about, you know,
Our bust size, what it's like to, unbox things, or, what it's like to be a woman in such a dominant, sometimes I just want to talk about a freaking video game.
yeah. And one thing that kind of I've been trying to practice that I actually heard from Jason, Metal Jesus, is really trying to set the ground for positive comments on my YouTube channel by hitting it hard for the first couple of days to steer the conversation towards something positive. So that's the majority of what you see. And then people who happen to stumble upon that video aren't necessarily going to be able to engage in a negative conversation that maybe has nothing to do with the topic that I'm talking about. And so it's just kind of like trying out different tactics on how can I still have a conversation about the thing I created and not about all of these other things that are important to talk about, but isn't the reason why I made the video.
Well, Nina, you and Kinsey had some great ways of responding to people being asshats to you on social media. Do you want to talk about what you do, like the turning it into a joke and?
Yeah, because sometimes I try don't feed the trolls, but when you get so many messages, you don't want to be defensive,
Yeah.
or the victim, or get mad, because they want you to get mad. That's what they want. And a lot of times I try to just make it funny, because a lot of times if I just say something dumb back, that's sort of what they're saying, they usually don't text me back.
They just stop.
They just stop. Whereas if you got mad, then they're like, oh, this bitch is riled up.
Let's do it again. That was fun.
Again.
Nina, tell them what
Yeah.
you were telling us earlier, what you do to them.
I mean, I'll if I get, and like I said before, I think I'm a rare case where I don't get a super amount of trolly people in Twitter specifically, but when I do, it does happen, and I'll just be like, lol, lamau, thank you, bye, and then usually they leave me alone. But honestly, just sometimes you just can't give them the time of day, or just laugh at them, because honestly, I'm you're just literally wasting your time. Just shut up, So I just laugh at them.
And I think that's there's no really right answer on how to deal with trolls, because if there was a right answer out there, probably, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
And I think it's important also to acknowledge that you don't have to respond at all.
Yeah.
And also you don't.
The block button is your friend.
Yeah, you don't have to respond at all, and it's okay. I think it's okay to kind of sit back and just take care of yourself when that stuff happens. Because
Take care of yourself
I used
first.
to be very vocal about this stuff on Twitter, and kind of what I was saying before, I just got kind of exhausted. So this is the first time I've talked about this shit publicly in a long time. And it's because I got so tired, and I had to just take care of myself for a long time and be quiet and kind of rely on other vocal people. And I think that that's totally okay if you have to do that too.
Yeah.
But now I just say
it's a
lol.
marathon,
It's
so
good.
taking care of yourself is really important.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I went back and forth on mentioning this, but I think I'm
Here it
going to.
comes.
Speaking of trolls and just unsolicited mean things that happen, sorry, laughing. We get dick pics. What the hell? Is there anyone in this audience who can explain to me the purpose? Has it worked for you? Ever?
Dick pics are the internet version of catcalls.
They are.
They're not effective, they're really creepy, and no one needs to see that. Come on now. As we're living in this era where we have the Harvey Weinsteins who think it's okay to do stuff like this, and we're looking at this idea of an environment where there's no repercussions for this kind of behavior. I've been joking around that a couple of my girlfriends and I have had an email account where we send all unsolicited dick pics to for the last 10 years, and we might make a tabletop book called Is This Yours? I think I can make a lot of money. I think I can make a lot of money. But the thing is dude, no. It's not even kept to online dating anymore. Within a day of Twitter having the open DM thing, I didn't realize I needed to go in and close my DMs because I think I was in the middle of a deployment. And all of a sudden, there's a bunch of dick pics in my Twitter DMs from people I don't know. I wouldn't want them from people I do know either, mind you. But like, the thing we need to call out very directly is dick pics, unsolicited dick pics. How many times have I hit 30 yet?
Do we have a dick drinking game?
The thing is they're unsolicited. That means it's not consensual. That means you are sexually harassing someone. The end. End of conversation. Unsolicited dick pics are sexual harassment. Mm-hmm. And they're going to end up in a coffee table book someday.
And to kind of like talk about that for a moment, every platform treats kind of images differently. For instance, like Instagram, if someone replies to your story, a way for them to engage with you, if they send you a photo, you have the option to download that attachment and view it. It's not shown to you immediately, whereas Facebook and Twitter, you click on that message icon and it's already there. It's just like, you know, it's like, give us some tools to be able to navigate this. Like, give me the choice to view images or not.
Also, can I point out though, how is it that nipples get you, like breastfeeding and nipples will get you kicked off Instagram and dick pics won't?
I got nothing.
Like, wait, what?
Like,
We get it. But it's funny because like on Facebook, the worst thing is you're looking at your Facebook like Messenger and it says, David sent a photo.
Yeah.
And you're like, let's play a game. Is it video games, beer, or a dick? Like, what is it gonna be this time? Like,
And it sucks
It's usually not beer.
It absolutely sucks having that kind of reaction, because I had that same reaction, especially if there's like no message before, it's just someone has sent you a photo, and my immediate thought is, great, it's probably a dick pic. And I hate having that thought, because a lot of the time someone's like, hey, I picked up this cool Saturn game, you know, and it's like, oh, okay, you actually just wanted to have a cool conversation. But that happens frequent enough that is, I think, most of our initial reactions is like, oh, someone sent me a photo.
there's always dread first.
There's dread.
You know, and I'm like, oh. And then you click on, and you're like, oh, good, video games.
Yeah. So it's relief. Yeah. You're like,
If you're in this room, more than likely, we were talking about this, more than likely you're not the one sending unsolicited dick pics, or you're not the one doing harassing, because you saw this title and you decided to come.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
The more allies on these subjects, the better. But I know all of us know that guy who thinks it's funny to send this stuff, or the person who just thinks they're being flippant and says something that breaks someone else's heart online. You know, simple comments like, you know, oh, you look fat, or oh, you know, that sort of thing. And what the biggest thing I think we all talked about that we hope you get out of this is help create that safe space. Here walking on the show floor, one of the things I've liked is I've been given respect by everyone. I've been walking around with my boyfriend, who admittedly is much more into retro games than I am. I love video games, but he takes it to a whole new level. But as I'm walking with him, I haven't had anyone here disrespect me or treat me like I might be stupid, which I've had happen at a lot of other gaming conferences.
Is that game for your boyfriend?
I'm a huge Seahawks fan, and if one more person ever asks me, is that your boyfriend's jersey? Anyway, but I'm slowly seeing this change to a safe space. So you here today have this opportunity to help us keep making this a safer and safer space, so that little people, no matter what their gender is, or what they decide their gender will be someday, or what they know themselves to be right now, that's what we need. We need more allies to make this as safe a space as possible. And that's true for retro games, for Overwatch, where I had absolutely the funniest match ever, was led by a 6-year-old who was the most badass technician I've ever seen. You know, creating those safe spaces. So if you're here, you're probably not a part of the problem, but you're definitely part of a solution.
Yes, thank you.
So thank you for being here.
And I wanted to just kind of have a time to share personal stories, and it can kind of be whatever you guys want. It could be advice. It could be a difficult situation that you have found yourself in, and you got yourself out, and for the better.
Me.
Rock, paper, scissors, it's your
Yeah.
turn.
Well, I'll just say a couple short things, I guess. For one, I was just like laughing at the dick pics conversation still in my head over here. And I just thought it was hilarious the other day. I was like, I've been streaming a lot on Twitch just like as a hobby. And I opened up my messages, which I didn't realize like anyone could send you a message on Twitch. I think I disabled it now, but I had another streamer being like, I'll pay you $1,000 for your nudes right now. And I was like, kind of considering it. But actually that's sexual harassment, so don't do that. But I kind of thought it was also really hilarious. It's like $1,000? Like, I made a video game where I'm half naked. You can buy it for $9 or something. Like, it's fine.
I've had people offer money for my feet,
Yeah.
and I'm like, that is not my face.
So
Just don't ask people for stuff like that.
Yeah,
'cause
it's weird.
Creepy. But I like making a joke about it because to me it was funny at the time, even though really it is not appropriate.
And that's why we turn off Twitch stream comments.
Yeah. Actually, Twitch streaming has been a good safe space for me, surprisingly. But anyways, that's a whole nother topic. The other thing I was gonna say was so I've been a weirdly I mean I already kind of alluded to this. Like I haven't had like horrible experiences, so I like to try and be like the supporter of people, and like I really think that amplifying people's voices about this stuff is super important. Like when someone is comfortable to tell their story, please listen to them. Don't try and interject with your opinion or about how you know so much about like this thing that they're talking about. Like no one cares. Like they're trying to tell their personal story. Just like listen to people and take that in and learn from it. I think it's really easy to kind of like, especially on Twitter and stuff, to just be like, here's my hot take about your sexual harassment. And it's like, no, it's not necessary. Like, share, support resources, be a good listener. I just think that that's more important than anything. Because I've definitely had my fair share of like creepy dudes at games shit. Like it definitely happens. I don't know if any of it is stuff I'd want to share right now, but know that it does happen. But I don't want that to scare away women from getting into this industry, because generally speaking, I've had an amazing experience. And I think as long as I speak out and people like you speak out and we're all sort of like open about this stuff, it's safer. And there is, like we were saying before, there's hope, there's support. It's not hell. It's going to be okay. And you can get involved. And I just feel bad when people are like, I can't work in this industry because this is a problem. Like, it is a problem, but you can still do what you're passionate about. We're here to help.
I think for my portion, I just want to talk about how I navigate the spaces that I am active on. So for instance, YouTube, like I said earlier, I try to lay that positive conversation. So I'm not spending all of my energy on fighting down in the comments, and it gives anyone else who's looking for a positive conversation an opportunity to continue that. I also have a crazy list of words to flag for my YouTube videos that I found on GitHub, because there's a repository that someone made of 1,000 characters, which has helped immensely. The only crappy thing about YouTube is that it only holds them, so you still have to go through held for review and see if anyone has actually been flagged by mistake. And that sucks, because they're like, man, I want that person to be able to have the conversation, but you have to do something to deflect all of that as well. I'm also really active on Twitch, and that's a very real-time place to have harassment happen. And I've just created some really hard lines of what is okay and what isn't okay, and you just immediate ban if you cross that line, because I don't want to have that conversation. I want to have a positive space for anyone to hang out, including myself. Anywhere that you put yourself publicly, you're open to harassment, and I think we've talked about it. There's no set in stone way of this is what you have to do. You have to find out what is right for you, and those are just some of the things that I found that's right for me to navigate that and not spend so much time mentally holding all of that.
I could tell you stories of things that happened when I was in the Coast Guard where I was pretty sure I was going to get court-martialed for telling admirals where to stick it, but because they didn't understand that the online world is the real world. But instead, I would say these are the key things, I think. 1, don't be a dick. 2, don't let your friends be a dick. 3, punch all the Nazis. And 4, it's going to be okay, we're all in this together. And that's it.
Yeah, I know, like, YouTube just started doing this nice new thing, which has actually worked out really well for me. They have, for beta right now, you can hide inappropriate comments. And I turned that on, and I think the last video I put out was the most positive comment space ever. Except for this one troll who, like,
Oh, God.
calls me a beach now because that doesn't get flagged. So I'm a dumb beach.
And I keep saying you should wave goodbye to them.
And
Your groans are my applause. So
And that would just turn the tide.
Yeah.
We can do this all day.
But it's definitely like, I remember when I very, very first started, my very first video with Metal Jesus, I was terrified. And then I did the video, I survived, and then I read the comments. And it's such like a weird thing, because you want to read them, because you want, there's good stuff in there.
Yeah.
And that's how you can build a community, you can respond to people. There's a lot of worthwhile comments in there, but you do have to sift through the bad. And it was kind of eye-opening to me, like, the first time, going through, they're like, a lot of these comments aren't about what I said. Like, it could have been a video about anything, and like, it'd be the same comments. But, like, it's been quite the journey. And I do think it's actually helped my confidence a lot in the long run. Like, I've learned how to have thicker skin, and I've learned, like, you know what, people are assholes. But there's also people who aren't assholes out there. And, we just gotta band together and be positive and create a positive space.
I genuinely believe there actually are more good people than bad, which is ironic coming from me because, ask anyone, I'm not a people person. And I think that the more we shine a light in these spaces and the more we are that lighthouse, there's less creepy crawly places for these trolls and jackasses to hide. And I think that's the turning point we're seeing now on social media, in Hollywood, in tech, is that more and more people are speaking up and there's less places to hide.
Mm-hmm. And I also wanted to kind of have a positive note as well. Most of this has been pretty positive, but like, what are your guys' favorite things about being in the games industry, being in this community? Because, it's pretty great. Let's be honest.
Easily some of the most brilliant minds I've ever met. People that make me laugh until my face hurts. People that have been there for me when a friend of mine passed away very suddenly. Just very tight-knit community. And it's just, you have a rough day and we all get together and we play a board game and inevitably a certain someone kills us because his dice rolling sucks, but but no, seriously, it has been, no matter where I was stationed, friends from where I'm originally from in Seattle in the gaming community would let me know who was in that new place I was stationed that was a part of the community. So on top of my Coast Guard family, I always had the gaming community family no matter what city I lived in, and that to me was amazing.
For me, it's being able to really connect with a lot of people over a common interest. Being able to have conversations about video games and being exposed to like, oh, you've played that game, have you heard about this one? No. And I would never have heard about that if I wasn't in this space. And like, I think it's really connecting with people is what I keep coming back to, whether it's on YouTube or Twitch, Twitter as well. Just being able to have that positive interaction over a common interest, which happens to be something awesome like video games, but that leads to other awesome things like music and
Beer.
books and beer and coffee. And it's just being able to have a great conversation with people who might be experts or just enjoying the genre.
Oh my God, I had so many things to say. Now I'm kind of blanking out. So I think maybe a good thing to include in this conversation, like, we've been talking a lot about like harassment and stuff like that, and a lot of that will manifest in people like personally reaching out and sending you a dick pic or something like that. And a way that you can reach out to someone in this industry or someone that you admire in any industry personally that isn't bad is telling them that you appreciate their work. Because I think a lot of us, like, I don't know, I'm a game developer, I work alone a lot, like at my desk, on my laptop. And I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of people reach out to me personally who've played my work, who have really connected with it, to just like thank me. And that honestly like really keeps me going all the time, despite any kind of hateful stuff that people say to me. Or I have like a really bad habit of Googling myself, and that's where I find the bad stuff usually. Don't do that.
I've gone down that rabbit hole.
It's so bad. But what you can do that I think is pretty easy is just like tell people that you appreciate them and that you like what they're doing, and play their stuff, watch their stuff, engage with their stuff, share it, and just tell them like, wow, I really like what you did. And like, I always like to shout out like other cool lady devs that I like. I wish I had written down a list. I should have ahead of time, but like Kat Small's doing really cool stuff. Emma Kidwell is my friend, so I'm biased, but she makes amazing games. Christine Love's work is really good. I've done a lot of like Giant Bomb Game of the Year lists, and I try to put a lot of like fellow women devs whose work I've liked that year on those lists, so you can look there too. And I try to share a lot of people's work who maybe like are, other women that I like or having trouble like getting their stuff out there. So just like telling people that you appreciate them and sharing their work can be some of the most powerful things you can do to make, help people feel more comfortable.
Yeah, definitely for me, my favorite part of the games industry is the community. I have like, over the last like 5 or 6 years, I have met some of the most amazing people. I have forged great friendships that are gonna last, and like we can play games together. This is great. This is the best friendship ever. Like, and so even amongst all the kind of like negative, like garbage comments, all that stuff, like there is definitely a bright shining star in the games industry, and that is a lot of the awesome people. I mean, if you're here, you're probably one of them. Like. So thank you very much. And we have about 5 minutes left, and I thought I'd try to squeeze in a few audience questions. We have a little bit of time, so.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, given that the DMCA is the only real tool of real-world consequence, and Twitch has stricter rules about what kind of cleavage you can show as opposed to who can register accounts, waiting for the next big video streaming platform to occur, like, what are some tools you would expect out of the next one to help curb harassment?
Twitch people? Live people?
Twitch people?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I think Twitch does a lot of good things already by allowing you to have active moderators who can help you, and it's hard. It can be hard starting out, especially if you are just starting up your Twitch stream, to find those people who will do that with the mindset that you have that you want for your audience. They also implement things like banned words. They also started including a feature called auto mod, which you can turn up the filter from 0 to 5 on how picky it's going to be about holding comments, and I have it at a 2 right now, and it's kind of picky. So I'm curious as to how many messages it'll hold if you bring it up to 5, but I think Twitch has been doing some really, really positive things for that, so I currently don't have a suggestion for how they could make it better.
I would just say like support creators who are cultivating a positive culture and like get them to be very popular so people can learn from the culture that they've cultivated. So I really like Adam Kobel's streams. He's a really good person to check out, and his stream is like very inclusive, very positive. He has really smart things to say about video games and about culture. The streamer that got me like into Twitch was Kung Fu Fruit Cup, and she's just like adorable and like just has like a super positive stream, great mods. So yeah, from my perspective, I would just say like supporting people who are creating the culture that you want to take part in.
All right, next. Yeah.
Say you've gotten to a point where your personal harassment campaign is really pretty bad, where people are contacting your family, your exes, your friends, your coworkers, your bosses, and things like that. And since you're getting hits from like multiple areas, you can't necessarily pinpoint where it's coming from. Going offline is not an option, just because, and I've heard that from like parents, friends, or whatever, they're just like, just stop going online. And I'm like, okay. But if you kind of need that to network, and you kind of need that to work, you can't necessarily do that. So what can you do to, I'm guessing, like, do you have any hints or tips for just at least getting through it? I mean, there's having a thick skin, and then there's just being inundated with hate, and like, I don't know how necessarily to shut that off.
So the first thing to know is you're not alone. There are a lot of us that are here that know that. So reach out to, I know that any of us, if you reached out to us, we'd be there to help you out. So know that you're not alone in this. You're not the only one who is experiencing it. One thing is talk to your local authorities. Preemptively speak to your authorities. I'm planning to move next year, and whatever neighborhood I pick, my significant other and I will be going to the local police to let them know that we are who we are, that we're in an industry, and that if anyone ever swats us or doxes us, please call us first. Here's our number. That's proactive. Be open and honest with your family and friends. Be like, hey, this really sucks, but this is the environment I work in. I need you to know that this is happening. One thing I do is I have filters set up that when those things come in, I have files that save them. So that if I ever need to take legal action, I've got everything cataloged and documented. The moment you see that stuff ramping up, talk to your boss, be like, hey, I need you to know that I'm experiencing some harassment from outside of work. They're targeting things at work. Here's what's going on. Here's the actions I'm taking. The more open and honest you are with the people who are going to be impacted from the beginning, the less impact those trolls are going to have, because the people in your life aren't surprised. And document the heck out of everything. Save those emails. I know it sucks, but put them in a file and save them. Because at the end of the day, if it reaches a point where you have to take legal action, you need as much documentation as possible. And then the other thing is set those filters up so that they're going into that folder and you don't have to be bombarded with it every day. Take that moment to step back. Don't go offline forever, but like I'm known for going out to my family's lake property and literally there's no cell phone out there. So I'm literally off the grid for a few days. Take that time, take a step back. But you just have to document, be open with the people in your life, and don't be afraid to reach out for help. Because the worst things that have been happening are when you see someone who is struggling and they don't reach out for that help because they think they're in this alone, and you're not. And like I said, I know that all of us would be more than happy to talk to anyone who reached out to us saying, hey, I'm being harassed. And there are great online resources now. Zoe started, what's her organization called? Crash Override, there we go. Brain stopped for a second. I almost said Overwatch. That's because we were talking about Overwatch for like a good half hour. There's Crash Override, there's different organizations now that can help you with this sort of thing. And then I can tell you from the federal perspective, I know that the Department of Homeland Security and a few others have actually started taking a lot of this stuff more seriously. There are special FBI groups looking into this sort of thing. So like I said, document, because if, knock on wood, it never happens to you, but if it does come to the point where you have to talk to the authorities, if you come in and say, here's all the documentation of when this started, here's all the documentation of what's been going on, you have a better leg to stand on than people have been bugging me on Twitter.
All right.
Sorry, that was a really long answer.
No, but it was perfect. Well, we only have about a minute left, so I will take your question. Hand went right up, so.
I'll make it quick. obviously with social media, people can just create a new account, but did I understand correctly that if somebody is sending, I don't get these obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but I don't get dick pics, thankfully, because I have no interest in them either. I don't know who would. But am I to understand correctly that if on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, if somebody sends that kind of stuff to you, even though they could just create another account, their account doesn't get banned for that? And
Correct.
if that is the case, why the hell are we not, as an entire world, making as much fucking noise about that as possible? That should never happen.
Correct. So just so to kind of, you're absolutely right, it should never happen. But let's be really frank right now, Facebook and Twitter are making money off of hate. Facebook and Twitter are making money off of threats of war, off of Nazis making threats, off of dick pics, off of Gamergate. Twitter got put on the map because of a lot of this stuff. Like, my parents had no idea what I was doing on Twitter until they started seeing Gamergate in the news. They're like, what's this Gamergate thing on Twitter? These companies are making money off of hate. They're making money off of literally fake news. Like what happened this last year with Facebook, when they got rid of their human checkpoints on news. Their news algorithm is now entirely automated, conveniently enough, right when they had a spike in sales on news sites. They're making money off this stuff. And they're really, the best option is, for users to start being so loud and protesting so much that they finally have to, figure it out. And it's also a responsibility of our companies. Different companies should stop giving money to companies like Twitter and companies like Facebook until they actually start upholding their own policies.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. We are overtime.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out.